This Dicebreaker video is sponsored by Wild Bills. Ditch the manufactured flavors. Your taste buds deserve better. Treat yourself to Wild Bill's premium handcrafted soda pop. Mouth-watering beverages that allow you to escape to the most interesting places imaginable. Cheers to refusing the drink from the mainstream. Cheers to kick-ass canned. Cheers to being veteran-owned and operated. At Wild Bills, flavor isn't everything. It's the only thing. Use discount code CHEERS15 for 15% off your first order.
In the past, I have been accused of being a glutton for punishment when I'm playing board games. Chris.
Yes, Jill.
I'm going back.
To where, Jill?
To the monster.
No! Liv?
All I'll say is, sorry for wanting to add a bit of spice to the game. However, in this list, we have rounded up 5 of the Carolina Reaperist, super fresh wasabiest, Nando's extra hottest board games we have ever made our way through. These extremely challenging board games are ridiculously difficult to surmount, but maybe you're up to the challenge. While you're at it, maybe you can help us achieve the difficult task of getting to 100k subscribers by hitting that subscribe button. Now, on with the list. Number 1, Eldritch Horror. Nobody ever said saving the world would be easy, much less so when what you're saving the world from is something as terrifying and foreboding as a slumbering elder being who has just begun stirring. You won't like them when they're asleep, and you'll like them even less when their nap has been interrupted. When playing Eldritch Horror, your goal is to make sure these little bundles of terror stay asleep. Shh. If not, a battle of epic proportions ensues. Just like with a real baby, I assume. In order to keep these monstrosities from wreaking havoc upon the world, the players take up the roles of investigators who travel the world searching for clues and preventing disaster. This might make sense for the Fed, the explorer, or the martial artist, but perhaps not for the magician, the musician, or the gravedigger. Regardless of who you are playing, each investigator brings something important to the table. Despite being seemingly prepared, there is an onslaught of obstacles for you and your teammates to contend with, including, but not limited to, monsters and epic monsters for you to try and surmount, gates for you to close in order to remove these monsters from the board, clues for you to find, and rumors for you to investigate. All of this certainly sounds hard enough, but then you have a smorgasbord of penalties that could hinder your journey, like injuries, restrictions, and madness conditions that will make your life a whole lot harder. All of that challenging nonsense goes along with a handy countdown until the Ancient One awakens, the Doom Tracker. If you're wondering what the goal of this game is mechanically, it's to solve mysteries unique to each terrifying eldritch being, while also being impeded by a new Mythos card each round. Are these Mythos cards ever escalating in challenge level? You had better believe it. With all of that in your way, you're going to need to get your best investigators on the case. Number 2, Dead of Winter. You have likely seen me talking about Dead of Winter on the channel before, and if not, here's a link to our Why You Should Play Dead of Winter video. Although I rave about how much I love this game for its difficult win conditions, it's not always a thrilling ride of close calls while you either pass or fail by heart-poundingly close margins. Sometimes it's just plain miserable. Similar to Eldritch Horror, this game likes to stack the odds against you with mechanics that trip you up at every turn. So your survivors at the safe haven known as the Colony aren't able to simply hunker down for the winter and hope for the best. While attempting to complete your main objective before you are overrun by the zombie horde, you are also put up against a crisis for the round that will result in dire consequences for you and your team if you don't complete it. Make sure to complete this objective without depleting the colony's morale, by the way. If not, it's game over. Nestled in the dark heart of the game's mechanics is the exposure die, which you must roll when you want to visit any of the in-game locations, housing the tools and supplies you will need to survive the harsh winter. The rolling of the exposure die will result in one of 4 things: nothing, a wound, frostbite, or a zombie bite. That's a risky trip to your local corner shop. To top it all off, nothing can push you further from accomplishing your main objective like a betrayer in your midst. Dead of Winter pushes your paranoia to its limit by leaving you unsure of whether or not you're being sabotaged by a fellow player. At the start of the game, each player draws an objective card that they must keep secret. which may or may not name you as a betrayer. So either this player will break the game, or you might self-sabotage it by exiling a perfectly innocent player who could have helped you reach your objective. There are all sorts of pitfalls ready to set you back during Dead of Winter, and just like Eldritch Horror, a lot of it comes down to luck. If you've got rotten luck, these games might just trip you up. Number 3, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Though this is a delightful and intellectually challenging tabletop game, it has been nicknamed Sherlock Holmes Insulting Detective, due to its, frankly, absurd expectations. Yes, we understand that Sherlock is the world's greatest consulting detective or whatever, but it doesn't mean that he gets to be mean about it. In this game, we take up the role of what ultimately comes down to Sherlock Holmes' interns, hoping to take up the mantle of super sleuths when he decides it's time to hang up his deerstalker. Which looks tacky, by the way. A case comes about and Sherlock will send us off on our own to take a stab at it. We're not entirely sure if it plays out like this in his head though. He probably sees it as patting our soft little heads, packing us up a lunch and watching us toddle off out the door. Well, Mr. Holmes, I'll have you know that we solve cases thoroughly and we solve them well. For example, in that one case where there was a murder and it was clear who the murderers seemed to be, but we knew it wasn't actually them and then figured out that it was actually another person with a clear motive. This is a spoiler-free list. Sometimes a case can be extremely rewarding and resolve with a relatively happy ending. There are other instances, however, in which Sherlock does some mental gymnastics that simply do not make sense and suggest we're utterly imbecilic for not seeing his answer after visiting 2 leads. It follows this kind of format. There's a murder, Sherlock visits his tailor and the victim's mum's cat and figures out that the murderer was actually a scorned ex-lover with a collection of fine silks who is currently hiding out in her brother's attic, living as a bat full time. The game should be retitled Sherlock Holmes Kinda Psychic. So, even when you expect to rock back up to 221B Baker Street, having solved the case in full, and finally getting that sweet, sweet recognition from Dad, Sherlock, I meant Sherlock. It's never going to be that easy. I meant Sherlock. Number 4, Ghost Stories. Ghosts typically come in one of 2 flavors. You've got the friendly, please avenge me and or be my living friend spirits. Think of the Caspers of the Afterworld, the pottery-loving Patrick Swayze of Ghost, or the silent spectre from Mysterium trying to help solve its own untimely demise. More often than not, though, ghosts tend to be a bit of a handful. There's the homewreckers of Paranormal Activity, the troublesome targets of Phasmophobia, and phantoms who approach chatting on a Ouija board with all the decorum of throwing a bag of Scrabble tiles into a washing machine. In other words, they're mean-spirited. Haha, and in need of a good bustin'. Ghost Stories ghosts absolutely fit into the second category. Led by the Lord of Hell, Wu Feng, they've decided to haunt the absolute bejesus out of a town and its unfortunate inhabitants in an effort to bring their undead ruler back to life. Standing in their way are a group of Taoist monks, the players, who must work together to exorcise as many of the phantoms as they can before dispatching Wu Feng himself. Obviously, taking on the Lord of Hell and an army of the dead is no easy feat. While creator Antoine Bowser is most famous for beginner-friendly games such as Seven Wonders, Tokaido, and Hanabi, the designer's Ghost Stories has earned a reputation as one of the most difficult board games ever made, with the odds seriously stacked against the players from the word go. The players must move between locations in the village, rolling dice to banish ghosts off the board. Except the ghosts keep coming. Every turn, a new ghost appears, making it an endless task to fight off the waves of wraiths. That's if you're lucky enough to roll what you need to get rid of the ghosts to begin with, even with helpful Tau tokens only going so far to make up for the luck of the dice. The players can gain the help of the villagers to improve their chances, but they're countered by the ghost's own abilities to curse players, haunt helpful locations, and just make an already difficult task even harder. Even on its standard difficulty, Ghost Stories is ridiculously tough, and that's before you get to the higher levels, which add multiple incarnations of Wu Feng to the mix. First released in 2008, Ghost Stories was remade a couple of years ago as Last Bastion, which swapped the spooky setting for a more generic castle defense game. While the change of theme to yet another fantasy world is arguably a downgrade, Last Bastion did tweak the game's rules to make things a little easier for players to claim victory. Still, don't expect to win on your first try though. Whether you're able to find a copy of the original Ghost Stories or its reboot as Last Bastion, be prepared for one of the toughest co-op experiences any board game has to offer. Winning is dead hard, but if you ever pull it off, you know that no other board game will ever seem as difficult again. Good luck, you'll need it. Number 5, Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island. Surviving on a deserted island is a grueling, difficult challenge, so it makes perfect sense that a board game inspired by one of the most famous castaways of all time would be one of the toughest games on the tabletop. Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island, shipwrecks players on their own isolated dot of land and tasks them with a simple objective: stay alive. Achieving that is much harder than it sounds though, as players will need to search for the materials and food they need to last long enough to complete each scenario's goal while dealing with the many dangers around them. Among the many threats you'll face are unforgiving weather and roaming animals who may decide their own survival depends on turning you into lunch. As you explore the island, you'll eventually be able to craft weapons, tools, and shelters out of resources you have discovered, helping you eke out another day. If you're playing as a group, teamwork will be essential to making it through, while if you decide to go it alone, in the single-player mode, you can benefit from the company of Friday and a canine companion. You can also use the welcome companions to help make games with friends a little more forgiving, with the Cursed Island living up to its name when it comes to really putting your castaways through the ringer. Powered by a chunky deck of event cards and a dense rulebook that'll feel like reading a novel the first time through, Robinson Crusoe lives up to its epic namesake in terms of adventure and adversity. It won't go easy on you the first or 50th time around, but if you're after a true challenge and the satisfaction of triumphing in the face of hardship, you'll find one here. And that's Dicebreaker's list of punishingly difficult board games that you can subject yourself to should you feel the need. Like me. I don't have a problem. Let us know which board games you've played that have driven you to the edge and the notable times they've wronged you. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. When we get to 100k subs, we're hoping to do something special, so stay tuned for more on that. We've also got links to merch in the description, and you can join Dicebreaker Plus for exclusive videos and emotes by clicking the join button below. And you can read some excellent articles by our talented editorial team and freelancers over on Dicebreaker.com. Check out the other videos like this one that are available here on the Dicebreaker YouTube channel, and as always, have a lovely day. Bye-bye!